Two candidates, one seat. The race covers. This is the live coverage of the 2026 presidential election in Benin.
It's 7 p.m. in Dakar and 8 p.m. in Cotonou and Abuja. Good evening to you out there. This is West Africa Democracy Radio broadcasting on 94.9 FM. We are live online at WADR.org. Welcome to the fourth and last live studio broadcast of the presidential elections in Benin, or better still, Benin decides. Again, glad to have you stay with WADR, but above all, for trusting us to bring you update on the radio across our social media platforms and on satellite. Regarding today's vote, we brought you live calls, special reports, excerpts, and interviews looking at major issues in today's election and expected outcomes in the coming days. I'm Abdullahi Hassan, and with me in the studio is Sankule Janko. Sankule.
Yes, good evening, Abdullahi. I'm glad to be here. It's been a very eventful day, of course, since in the morning we've been here providing information, live coverage as events keep evolving throughout the day. In Benin, in Cotonou, in major parts of the in the country, and here as well in Dakar. I was at the Beninese consulate. Somewhere around in the primary school where you have Beninese come from the Gambia, Cote d'Ivoire, Mauritania, Guinea, who came to cast their vote here. So it's been a very eventful day so far.
Many thanks, Uncle. And with us also in the studio right now is Dr. Ibrahim Sane, a former Senegalese parliamentarian, a broadcaster, and now serves as a political and governance expert. Good evening and good to have you join us, sir.
Good evening, Abdullah. I'm not sure you should call me an expert, but a resource person.
It's okay. So we'll be engaging you on some of these issues, that you are so familiar with when it comes to democracy in the African context, and what should define elections and what should guide decisions post-elections.
True, yes, those are things I've been covering as a broadcaster, as you first said, and then also those are things I lived, actually, when I was a parliamentarian.
Many thanks. We'll be talking a whole lot more on that, sir.
Imagine having a great broadcaster, a former broadcaster, and then a politician as well who knows all about elections.
This is why
he's more than a resourceful person. He's an expert. I think I agree with you.
He's an expert on many fronts. Thank you for staying with us. So for the next 1 hour, we are sure to bring you an interesting conversation to look at the many issues, the dynamics and dimensions about today's vote in Benin and how we can build a comparison with what did happen in Senegal. Of course, after that was Ghana, and the future of democracy in Africa at a time when more and more studies suggest that there is a shift away from democracy as a preferred governance structure. Now, over 7 million eligible voters today went to the polls in Benin to elect a new president, an election seen as a key test for the country's democracy. So far, polling stations have closed across the country and counting is underway in certain locations amid a generally calm atmosphere. From the economic capital Cotonou to central towns like Bahikon and Abomey, polling stations opened on time and voters began casting their ballots.
Indeed, Abdullahi, and in the north, including Parakou, Kandi and the border town of Malanville, the process passed off peacefully without major incidents. However, security was a major focus in this election. As you know, Abdullahi, authorities have deployed a strong presence of defense and security forces, particularly in northern border areas, following recent attacks by armed groups. Officials rather say these measures are aimed at ensuring a peaceful and a credible vote. Observers from regional and international organizations are also on the ground monitoring the process and, working alongside local civil society groups as well.
Also, early indications suggest that electoral materials were deployed to thousands of polling stations as expected, according to the Electoral Commission. But there was one major observation. You'll be coming to tell us more about that, Doctor, which was the fact that there was a bit of low voter turnout, or should I say a voter apathy.
Well, not surprising. There is not really a choice between the two candidates. We have somebody who's little known, although he did run before as a candidate. But he's a nobody, more or less. That is not a statement on democracy in Benin. I must just correct that. But honestly, it's a foregone conclusion for this time.
Okay, you're talking about Paul Hungbe.
Paul Hungbe was a candidate before, and was beaten by Talon, but this time he really is not a heavyweight in Beninese politics. Yeah.
Well, we'll come back on that, Doctor. And so, as our guest rightly said, participation has been declining in recent elections from about 65% though in 2016 to around 50% in 2021, and many fear that it could fall further this season. Both candidates in the race, Romuald Wadani and Paul Hungbe, had urged their supporters to come out and vote, but the absence of the main opposition party, that is the Democrat Party, could have an impact. Many say it did have an impact, though.
Well, and beyond the candidates, Abdullah, the election took place against a backdrop, of key national concerns. Youth unemployment, economic pressures, and questions around political participation remain central issues for many voters. And results are expected in the coming days as Benin awaits the outcome of this presidential vote today.
And we also have Gafudu Sakboho, our Beninese correspondent for this special broadcast, joining us online. Good evening to you, Gafudu. How are you?
I'm doing good, sir. I'm good, and good evening to everyone.
Very well. It's 8 p.m. in Cotonou. It's about 4 hours since polling stations closed. Give us an update about the voting. The vote count process.
Yeah, the vote count process is over in most of voting stations. Just those that started a bit late that are still in the process. But for most of those voting stations, the process is already over, and the boxes are being conveyed towards the various destinations, which are the various arrondissements. And from the arrondissement, which are like the local districts, they will now be conveyed by tomorrow, hopefully, to the Electoral Commission.
So what is the atmosphere like at this particular time? Because what you see in other countries or in other classes that once polls close and vote counting, like you said, in certain polling stations also get done with, you begin to hear this subtle celebration or jubilation by one or two camps, all or each claiming victory. What is it like right now?
Well, actually, we are not really observing that here because, like I said this afternoon, we already know that the ruling parties, the ruling candidates, the ruling party candidate is going to win. So it's not going to be a surprise. The jubilation would have happened if it were like, okay, there was a strong fight and then eventually they made it. But this was not. What the jubilation might be maybe about the turnout, if maybe they succeed in reaching the 50%. But I'm not sure that there will be any jubilation. Yes, the 50% threshold. That actually what can legitimate the results and also the president that will be elected.
So, but what are the observers on the ground saying about the conduct of the election in the whole?
Yeah, in the whole, they appreciated the peace and the calmness of the population. Everything ran peacefully. There weren't any incidents. That's the most important thing that they observed, and they also appreciated the fact that the materials, everything was okay. So there was no shortage of materials or anything. So everything happened well and timely. They appreciate that. So for all the AU and the ECOWAS and also other international observers think that technically there weren't that much really to say, and we have to go to the end of the process to appreciate the democratic aspect or two, because there are still other steps.
Exactly.
Gafulu, this is Sankule Janko speaking. I just want some clarity about when Abdullah asked you about whether so far people are beginning to celebrate because of perhaps seeing the way the trajectory about the results. I just want clarity as to, for example, here in Senegal, that is what we call spot counting. Is that similar there as well? Perhaps that will give you an inclination or an idea of where these results are headed. Even though you said, I mean, it's more or less like a formality. Yes. I mean, is that the case in Benin as well?
No. Like I said, this election is really special. The expectation was there. Everybody knew what was going to happen. So there's when I moved around most of the stations, I didn't see anything like a victory and the people have to jubilate about it. What everybody was happy about is that they were able to vote, and then eventually they're expecting the turnout to be what they expect for their candidates. So honestly speaking, across the country and some of other colleagues that I've been in touch with, we didn't observe that. I know Senegal's case was special, but here the special. What is special also is that the outcome was already. We already knew the outcome, and what we don't know is the turnout. So that's maybe if the jubilation may come when eventually by tomorrow we have a trend of maybe 50% or above.
Earlier, just one second. Just earlier, you did. We know that during the interviews, the course of the interview, there were low voter turnout. I mean, during the course of the day, did this improve or it remained as it was early in the day?
Well, in Cotonou, we haven't seen that much. I mean, in Cotonou, we saw that late morning and early afternoon. We guess people when in church in the morning now are out and now started coming, but we don't have, like I said, we don't have those queues. So that one did not change at all. I mean, we did not observe queues in polling stations, unlike other areas, maybe rural areas and other cities. But in Cotonou especially, and in Porto Novo, we have gotten long queues of voters. So it might be because maybe in Cotonou and Porto Novo and maybe Calavi were supplied more stations, and maybe people could go to any station they could, but I don't think that was the case. But we just have to wait and see what the result will give. But this rush that we see in other parts of the country, we did not observe that throughout the day in Cotonou.
Well, just before we let you go, our guest will be questioning. Well, before we question him, he wants to question you. He has one question for you.
Okay, hello, I'm Dr. Sani. And one question is, what is the process for proclaiming the outcome, the results? Can, for instance, media give the results in one polling station after the polling station has counted the votes?
The media cannot give the media may give maybe the number of voters, not in terms of percentage. For instance, this around 6 p.m. We had the national TV that already gave some results from the station where the ruling party candidate voted, where they say, okay, 3,000 people voted, and all the 3,000 voted for that candidate. So that came from the national television, and also we have other stations, but media is just careful because they can only probably give some maybe trends, but not. They have to wait maybe the official figures from the Electoral Commission before they could start sharing anything.
They cannot
the rules
collect.
are very strict about that.
They cannot collect for themselves what is the outcome in a polling station. They have to wait for official figures.
Yeah, they might give they might give figures, but still add that this is not official. This is just temporary, and the right figures will come from the Electoral Commission.
So we can't know trends really. No.
No trends.
Right,
I think
you.
I mean, doctor. I think you're referring to like the system you maybe have.
You have it in
Senegal, and even like you have in US,
Yeah.
where you track polls and you can actually
Yeah.
even have percentage.
Exactly.
Well, I
We
didn't know
don't have
that.
that
I
here.
thought they had it in Benin. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Gafudu
we-
Sakbohu. I'm sure we'll be
you're
getting
welcome.
back to you much later. But if we don't forgive us, we'll be in touch. I mean, the situation post voting also could really turn either way. So we'll be engaging you more on that. Thank you, Gafudu.
No problem. No problem. Thank you so much.
So, Doctor, let me begin with you. This is becoming a trend, not just in West Africa, but across the continent, where more and more we are seeing the exclusion of opposition, whether by law, which many say today the justice system has been weaponized, or the institutionalization of state institutions to work against the opposition. More and more, this is a trend. In the last elections in Benin, they saw about near 30 candidates, this time just two. How undemocratic is this?
The election before, there were about 48, 50 candidates when Talon was first elected in 2016. So there were quite a few around. And then we have to be fair also to those governing. What happens there are laws that are there, laid out, known by everyone. Now, the regime in place usually knows how to use the laws so that people don't run. I find suspicious that with sponsors, the parrainage, as they call them in French, they required 28, I think.
I mean, okay, for English speakers, parrainage, that would mean the sponsorship.
Yeah. So the sponsors, there were 28 of them required, and
For each party?
For each candidate.
For each candidate.
So the Democrats' candidate had 28, the required figure. And a miracle happened. One of the sponsors just said he didn't agree with the process of selecting the candidate, so he's not sponsoring that candidate anymore. So he withdrew, and by law...
-1 counts.
-1.
And there was not enough time to replace him?
Unfortunately not. So he was his candidacy could not be accepted. Now, is it honestly and genuinely somebody who didn't agree? Has he been manipulated by the regime? That nobody can swear on. I mean, but it's disturbing. I agree with you.
But, Doctor, what does this say about Benin's democracy? I mean, in a process where, like, the correspondent says that even everyone knew, like everybody already knows the outcome. How democratic would you describe an electoral process like that?
I mean, this is really unfortunate. I don't think we would blame entirely the regime in place. I think I view Benin as a mature democracy. In 2016, there was not an incumbent, but somebody chosen, designated by the outgoing president. And he was beaten. He simply was beaten by the outsider, the opponent. And he accepted it. And the outgoing regime accepted it, which I think is a sign of democratic behavior. Now, all along, they laid out rules to be a candidate and a registered candidate, and those rules can turn against someone. Have the rules been manipulated? It's difficult to say, and it's unfortunate that it gives an image of somebody cheating. I, for one, don't believe they actually are cheating. It really is unfortunate. It's a country I love very much. I have a lot of friends around, and a country I know as well. I was an observer for about 5-6 years of elections in the sub-region, Benin, Togo, Mali, Cote d'Ivoire, Niger. I've been to those countries observing elections. And the way things were improving, and I don't see them going backwards, and I don't think it really is somebody wanting to cheat. And I don't believe the outgoing regime needs to cheat to win. For what I know, I think they would have won anyway. This is what I believe.
Well, but what if they did through the back door? Like, I'm happy you did mention the fact that you also covered elections in Cote d'Ivoire. We also saw what happened in Cote d'Ivoire. One of the principal candidates had this issue of dual citizenship.
Cham.
To the Cham, and even though he worked on it, but I think he was a bit late, and that led to disqualification. And so I will go with you for the fact that whoever finds himself in that space should know better the laws, the rules, and play by them. But when they falter, they shouldn't blame the government.
Exactly. Do you know that happened in Senegal for the last election, presidential election? There were 1 or 2 people with dual citizenship, and they were eliminated. Now, is that yet the candidate standing for the outgoing regime lost? It's not necessarily that if that person is eliminated, but in Benin, it's unfortunate, really, that this thing happened. And so it gives the image of the regime manipulating the process. I don't believe so. I think dual citizenship is not accepted in Senegal. That person would have been eliminated, whether he was in Benin or in. You cannot have the idea behind rejecting dual citizenship. Take someone who is in Senegal. In this case, it was a lady who was French as well. Now, when that lady goes to France, she would obey to the French president. We could not have a Senegalese president being the citizen of France, and if the French president tells him or her to do something, they obey. I mean, we should be sovereign enough that the president would not have to obey another president. This is the problem behind dual citizenship.
Doctor, we'll come back to you, but I don't want to forget this very question I have, so I'll just throw it out already, which will bring us to the issue of trust in governance, or trust in public institutions, or trust in political appointees to manage the state, like in the case of Benin. But we'll come back to you to proceed with that. Sankule?
Yes, just that we are going for element A, but Doctor did say that the regime is going to win anyway. So that caught my attention. Probably I wanted to know what makes him think that actually, despite, even if the Democrats perhaps had participated, this regime would have emerged victorious?
I mean, to begin with, the Democrats, which is the strongest opposition party, don't have MPs, members of parliament, for instance. I mean, they were excluded from the election for the same rules. So what happens is they have been weakened very really. And the strongest person to run would have been Boniai. And he didn't run. In fact, he's even left the party now, saying for medical reasons or personal reasons, whatever it is. So they could not fill in someone who would have beaten the minister who
Romuald
Romuald Wadani. He did very well from relatively well in economic terms as finance minister and economic minister, and I think he is a very strong candidate and would have won. I mean, to be honest, I mean, we always have these issues. Maybe the regime did manipulate the process and tamper with the process. It could be, but I for one don't believe they did.
Right.
Well, you are listening to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal. We're live online at WADR.org. I'm Abdullahi Hassan. By my left there, if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook, is my co-anchor, Sankule Janko, and we do have our special guest in the house, Dr. Ibrahim Sene, a former parliamentarian and a governance and political analyst. Well, we do know that for every election, demography matters. And as Africa has been described as having the largest population today, 60% of that, if I'm right, young people. So for Beninese young people, how much does today's vote matter to them? Let's listen.
This is my very first time participating. I would like us young people to have opportunities in the future that will empower us and make our country thrive. I believe the future of our country, Benin, depends on us, the youth. So if we have a young president like us, someone who thinks about us, then we'll also need to support him in creating opportunities for us in the future. Benin needs to be able to develop effectively.
En tant que jeune, j'ai décidé de voter aujourd'hui parce que
as a young person, I decided to vote today because there is a candidate who really inspires me. Someone energetic with qualities I admire and a clear vision. That's what motivated me to come out and vote. As for my expectations, I say no to unemployment. It's clear that many of us work hard, earn our degrees, but end up staying at home or doing jobs that have nothing to do with our qualifications. This is not what we expect as young people. We study and then remain unemployed or underemployed. I say no to unemployment. There must be improvements in job creation for young people.
À l'endroit des jeunes, sur le plan de l'emploi.
I came out to vote, and my impression on the process is that it is better organized this year, because in previous years we did not receive text messages telling us where to vote and so on. But this time, everything was better structured. When I arrived, there weren't as many people as at previous times, so I was able to vote quickly. As for us young people, I would really like the next president to improve the conditions of young graduates who have completed their degrees but are still at home without jobs. He should help us find employment and improve our situation. Because when we go to school and earn our degrees, our parents expect us to find good jobs so we can support them and meet their needs.
The voice of young people in Benin who went out today to enjoy their civic right and responsibility to elect a new president who will steer the affairs of the country now, according to the amended constitution, not for 5 years, but for 7 years. And they matter a lot because Aside or beyond the promises made by the two candidates in the race, they are asking for specifics. Joining us is Austin Aigbe, WADR's liaison officer. Good evening and good to have you join us, Austin.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. And good evening, West Africans.
I know you've been monitoring the election all the way in Nigeria, and Nigeria actually played a critical role last December when they deployed a tactical squad to make sure that Patrice Talon's government stays in power and ensure that democracy thrives. Now, how important is this election, not just to Benin, but for the sub-region?
Very, very, very important, especially that after the Beninese elections, you have 2-3 major elections ahead into this year, December, and of course in 2027. With Nigeria's election also coming up, and Nigeria being the largest democracy, has a lot to learn from the Beninese election. I am not talking about the processes that led to this election or all of those oppression of opposition candidate. It's that the conduct of the election. I hear voters turning out massively beyond my comprehension. As early as 6:30, voters were already at the polling station, enthusiastic to vote. That is a people that is ready. I say this because Benin's election, Benin's democracy, outside that of Ghana, Benin's democracy tend to be one of the strongest. Having experienced coup d'etat, the last, one of the oldest democracies, just to, in a way, like you said, December coup, attended coup, Nigeria was able to dismantle that. That would have been the biggest blow to democracy in West Africa region. But with the sustenance of democracy in Benin, sends a stronger signal. Not all good together, because I still think that what President Talon has done, particularly in his second term, coming to the election of second term, with the way the oppression of opposition were, even though it continued, but there seems to be a massive turnout of voters to decide who should be their president. Which is, I give this to the same way I gave it to Ghana in 2014 December. I'm truly honored to have followed the elections in Benin.
Well, this was a question I had asked our in-house guest, but I'm happy you are there. So let me really ask, because also it's something you are passionate about when you talk about transparency and accountability. And I ask this because from the last election in Benin, moving on to just now having two candidates won by the ruling coalition or majority, to what extent do you think this will erode public trust in the government and governance structures?
Hello, sorry, can you take that question again?
So I'm asking, just imagine it's only two candidates, maybe not by choice, I guess, but you have two candidates. One of them will have to be the next president, not by choice though. That's what many say. I'm asking though at this point, to what extent do you think this will impact public confidence or trust in government and in governance structures?
So like the analysis is simple. The two candidates are directly or indirectly some form of they've got the support of the President Talon. So either one that wins, we still go almost like it tandem with what Talon wants. However, there's a major candidate supported by the president. If the voters turn out, it would have been so clear that what the people want, it's what is sustainable. And I think this is important.
Okay, I hope we'll get him back to complete his submission there. But Doctor, you heard what he said. And for me, it's critical that we get this done, because is it about what a group of people, or what in other countries they call them cabal? Is it what the cabal wants, what a group of people wants for a country, or what the people want? Okay, Austin, you're still here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Very
Yes,
well.
I can hear
Okay,
you.
okay. Yeah, you were saying something.
So I was saying that of the two candidates, there will be one. I mean, one is being supported majorly by President Talon, and if the other, I mean, I think the finance minister, is being supported by the people of Benin, the Beninese. So at the end of the day, it will be a choice between two candidates, whereas the two candidates knows one is on the part of the president, the current president, and the other who is just contesting. If any of them wins, they could be the candidate of the president. But however, the way you emerge, if you know the people voted for you, it will be a different ball game. Just the same way when President Talon came to power the very first time, you could see that massive support that almost undermine any form of whether there's a major opposition candidate. There was a bad one going effect that went ahead for him. But by the second term, he began to oppress opposition. The Democrat was literally suspended and all of things that happened. And today, there is no clear path for a major or strong opposition candidate, opposition party as it were. But we also know that the people are followed. That's why the people did not support the military regime. If the people had turned out en masse on the street of Cotonou, that coup would have succeeded. The people do not want coup. The Nigerian aircraft that came in, fighter jet that came in, did the job because there was no civilians on the street. If there were civilians on the street, it would not have happened.
Okay, we'll come back to Austin. I think the fact that we've been covering the Sahel now for how many years and all the coups, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and even Guinea, I don't think there's a country that will support that anymore because they completely take away your rights and freedoms, every other thing. So people really have read and seen and heard, and nobody wants to go that way. But I wanted to ask, Doctor.
My brother, Benin is different. If it happened in Nigeria today, you would see people on the street getting excited.
Well, Austin, we'll come back to you. Austin, we'll come back to you. This is an interesting debate. We'll come back to you. For me, I still want two things to be clarified here. Accountability and transparency, Dr. Ibrahim Hassani. When you have, supposing a government or a president imposed on a society, on the people, how do you ensure this accountability and transparency?
There are no mechanisms for that.
Are they
you can
respected or not? Just
no, they're not respected.
But you have institutions that technically
they
should.
Cannot, because they don't have the ways to implement this kind of checks.
And eventually, then there's going to be erode. What is it called now? The decline in public trust.
People come in. People promise, get elected, and there are no ways you can force them to respect their promises. There are no mechanisms, I'm afraid. So the only mechanism I know is election. So for the next 5 years, in the case of Benin, it will be the next 7 years. The president is not accountable to whatever he did promise or whatever it is. I mean, I'm afraid there are no ways. If the legislature is with him, I mean, Parliament is with him. So he cannot be stopped or voted against. So what way do you have to hold him accountable for what he said during the campaign? No, you do not have. So people in Africa, for the moment, from my point of view, is we go a lot by perceptions. And sometimes people tend to make uneducated decisions. We side with people who we like more than with the program he is going to implement. It's the talk, the promises.
So we're still doing people politics and not policy politics.
Exactly. So policy politics is not exactly there. And I believe that then people get disappointed very fast. It doesn't last. I mean, you elect a government and then you hear them, the outgone. It's never the current president who is good, usually. He's the past one or the future one. It's like coaches in national football teams. The coach who is there is rarely the right one. People will say, "Okay, well, we need this coach," and when he gets there, then they say, "No, the former one is the better one."
So isn't this the irony? So isn't this the irony in the case of Benin, where President Patrice Talon, the outgoing president, has been praised so well to have transformed the country economically, GDP
very
up
strong
there.
economic growth,
But on the ground, you have
but employment is a problem. Unemployment is high. But despite the economic growth, I mean, Benin is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, in the 8 YMO countries' economic growth. I think even beyond Côte d'Ivoire. Beyond Côte d'Ivoire. So you can see that it's difficult to say that he didn't do anything, obviously. He fought and won in 2016, which was not obvious. It was because there was infighting within the outgoing regime, so he was able to win. They chose a mixed blood guy, Zinsu, to run for the outgoing regime. They said, "We're not going to vote for a white guy." He wasn't exactly white. He was half Beninese and half French, but they just didn't accept him. So perceptions are important.
Talk about perceptions, Austin. Let me come back to you, Sankli, just a minute. Austin, I will need you to be quick about this. For instance, Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, also when he came in 2023, he promised swift, radical economic transformation or reforms. One of them was fuel subsidy removal, and ever since we keep reporting what has happened. So how can Benin go past that point? Because if Wadani was the finance minister under Patrice Talon, and during his campaign he promised to work on reducing the poverty index or rate, you would wonder if he had been responsible for all the economic plans, how comes? So how can they go past that point? Austin, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
I was saying that the same thing happened in Ghana. Politicians will always promise what they are running, they keep telling you they want to improve on it. In Ghana of 2014, the vice president who led the major economic trajectory of Ghana, including Ghana card and all of the things he wanted to do, he was still hammering on the same thing. When it comes, this is what he want to do. So in an attempt, while you hear incumbent candidate want to take over from incumbent party, you see they almost have a way of conflicting with the current work that is ongoing. They tell you we will reduce poverty. Why did you not do it in the last time? They were not on the driving seat. They could have advised, and the buck stops at the president's table. So he's not coming as president. So whether he has capacity will be different. The people of Benin will decide. The truth of the matter is that I don't think there's any difference between the policy or people politics, because if the policy is bad, it will impact on the people. If the people are happy, it means that the policy is well. That's the challenge when you mention the Nigerian state. On the 1 of May 29, 2023, subsidy was removed without any attempt to put measure in place to cushion the effect of the constraint from the poverty, the policy first subsidy removal. You remove it knowing that there will be consequences. There are no agenda setting on how the impact will not be on the bottom billions, the bottom millions. Today, 63% of the country's population live below poverty line of $1.25 a day. This is as a result of what some kind of policy trajectory. So the people is connected to the policy. Policy doesn't impact the people will shout. And that's one way to know that your policy is not going.
Doctor, I'm interested to ask you this question. We've seen what happened in Côte d'Ivoire. I mean, elections went smoothly. Guinea-Bissau, we all thought it was going to end. Unfortunately, we know what happened is history. But you did mention something that caught my interest about the trend within the sub-region. I'm tempted to ask you, how will the outcome of this election results influence the democratic trend in the region? Like you said, we have major elections coming, for example, in the Gambia, in Nigeria as well?
I think
Is it Austin?
It's for Austin, yes.
Okay, Austin, you respond first.
You respond for both of them, but Austin first, yes.
Yes, it does have an impact. You see, as we speak in Nigerian election today, if you have followed, you would have seen that opposition political parties are already bounding some walls. This were accusing INEC, that the electoral management body, of some kind of politicization and all of that. The reason is that the playbook that seems to be like the playbook today in West Africa country is oppress the opposition, keep them out of the ballot, get a low-level opposition so that we can maintain multi-party democracy. We saw that in Cote d'Ivoire, where the major opposition, you do all the things that we have to do, get them out of ballot. Babo, for instance, get them out of ballot. In Guinea-Bissau, get the major opposition out of ballot. What happened in Guinea-Bissau became different because the major opposition then went to support another opposition. And by the time that President Mbalo saw that was not getting to that playbook was not working for him, he then changed the narrative by heading for a coup. So Benin is also following. We may see that in Nigeria and of course in Syria alone. We know that the Gambia, Adama Barrow will recontest. He does not want to fulfill his own promise that which ECOWAS and West Africans supported him against Yahya Jammeh, is doing almost the same thing as Yahya Jammeh. It has done the first term, second term is on the road, and is likely to go for a third and fourth term. He has refused to amend the constitution. So these are some of the things. So Benin election, with the turnout, will be a signal to say, do the same as Benin. So we could mobilize Nigerians for the election in 2027 to say, if it happened in our neighbor, by our backyard, let's get it done. So the more people show up to vote, the less likely you are unable to manipulate results. I think that's the essence of voter participation in the electoral process. And I think, yes, Benin does have a good signal for elections, not necessarily for governance and democracy, but for turnout, which is part of democracy.
Okay, Doctor, what about you? What do you make of that?
Yes, I think in terms of trends, I would say one or two, things I think important. The first thing, I don't expect violence in Benin after this election. I think although it is suspicious, and it is suspicious, people will still accept the results. The second thing is it's difficult, more and more difficult today, and in the case of Benin, even so, to overturn the true results from the thing, because institutions overseeing the elections are getting better and better. And I've been observing elections for years, and I can tell you that. In Guinea-Bissau, would you think that the outgoing president would accept to be beaten? You take Senegal. Would you think that the incumbent regime would accept to be beaten? So they can't, because the mechanisms are there to make it difficult to overturn the true results from the field. So those are trends, and if we don't have violence in Benin, that will confirm that institutions overseeing the elections are getting stronger. That's a trend. That's what I think. And the first lesson, which would be clear from there, it doesn't mean the elections are fair because there is no opponent. I think not a single person disagreed that it's a foregone conclusion. So we call it an election, and the real problem is about the turn up. People are going to turn up or not.
Well, we are almost running out of time, but I think from the submissions coming from you, Dr. Ibrahima, and Mr. Austin, two things I see, but I will settle on one. Behind all of this drastic sudden changes have been the constitutions.
Sorry, they tend to change constitutions.
We saw that even in Benin.
Yeah, but even in Benin, they
the last
increased
3 months. So
yeah.
there is a Senate, but according to
7 years a term instead of 5 years.
This always happens.
And then there's a Senate and things like that.
So how do we, at this point, go past this where democratic or state institutions are very well strengthened, that they can operate with little to zero influence from the executive primarily, and maybe the legislature and the judiciary?
Yeah, well, there's one country whose constitution has remarkably stood out throughout the times. That's the United States. But as from the Second Amendment, I don't remember any major change. Maybe changes happen and we're not aware of. But in a lot of countries in the world, they do sometimes adapt, quote unquote, constitutions, sometimes to suit what they want. We must agree with that. There are people who change constitutions to so that to suit themselves to what they want. But I think it's something that is going to stop. This is what I believe. I believe they just cannot go on changing constitutions. You see the electoral part in the electoral law in Senegal, there are parts concerning eligibility that haven't been changed for years. Constitutions may have changed. You have to 5-year term or 7-year term. It did change, but something affecting elections, no. And it is difficult to do that in countries now, to tell you the truth. And you're right. People do not trust, not just because of the rulers, but also from opposition. The quality of opposition is also important. I mean, there are countries where you lose, you say, no, it's rigged. What do you have to lose? You just say it's rigged.
There has to be a winner and a loser.
You win, you say it's a free and fair election. You lose, you say it's rigged. I mean, systematically. And then you give up that claim and come back and join the regime you've been denouncing as fraudulent. But what do you take as a view on that?
Right. I mean, my last question to Dr. Austin Ibe would be, beyond the results, Mr. Ibe, what are the key governance challenges the next leadership must address in Benin?
It must pursue unification of West Africans. It must find a way to return the Sahel state back to the fold of ECOWAS, the same way we told John D. Mahama. These are, because it's bringing a new face to the table, it may bring a new idea, even though we know today that the Sahel state, particularly in Burkina Faso, has said, goodbye, kiss democracy, goodbye. We know those exist, but there are the new faces that can reconnect and begin the conversation beyond these older faces that led to the instances first of all. But just to quickly talk to Doc at the studio, yes. What created a problem in Guinea-Bissau was when Compaoré wanted a third term by amending the constitution. Today we have a military regime in that country. What created a problem in Guinea was when Alpha Condé wanted a third term and wanted to manipulate the election. It led us to military coup in that country. Senegal tend to be a different a bit because we know that Macky Sall wanted to push the election up to December of last year until ECOWAS stood against him. So the question is, until ECOWAS becomes strong to stop term elongation, including the fourth-term presidency in Côte d'Ivoire, or what is going to likely happen in the Gambia, what would have amended the constitution for a term limit, the Gambia has consistently said no. Even though Barron was part of those who suffer from that term, the consistent stay of Yaya Jammeh, there is still a challenge of constitutional amendment. Is it Togo? Togo has now made himself the Lord of all. removing himself from the president, weakening the position of president, and making the prime minister position to be as strong as almost like a military regime. The truth is that we must continue to speak truth to power to this political elite, that what they are doing is undermining democracy, and democracy needs stronger people. And I think that as Benin decide, whoever emerges as president of Benin has to be a front runner supporting John Mahama and of course other Democrats in the region to get democracy back by strengthening the ECOWAS protocol on good governance and democracy. These are fundamental.
Thank you very much, Mr. Austin Aigbe. We are counting down. We have just 3 minutes left. Out of that, Doctor, you can take.
Yeah, well, actually, there's one thing I need to correct, I believe, is it's the Constitutional Council in Senegal that opposed postponing elections, not ECOWAS. And they even set the date for the election,
for the March elections,
not ECOWAS. The internal institutions are strong enough to oppose a president.
They have that independence.
They have that independence, and they did it, and the president could do
this
nothing.
Is what others say should replicate, or
strong institutions.
Yeah,
I think most countries are moving towards that, and it will be difficult to tamper with elections in the sub-region. This I really believe, and believe me, I've been observing. You cannot rig elections in Senegal. It's impossible. I mean, observers and journalists are there to report on every polling station. You know, by the time the counting is over, journalists rush to their stations and just report.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim Sene. You are a former parliamentarian and is a broadcaster, and now governance and political analyst. Thank you very much for being a part of the discussion this evening.
My pleasure.
Mr. Austin Aigbe, all the way from Nigeria. This is about 9 p.m. and given the situation there today, you still make time to be part of the discussion. We highly appreciate you, and we hope to keep talking to you more to discuss governance issues across the sub-region and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, Sankule, we've come to the end of the fourth and last live studio broadcast of Benin's election.
For the English.
You say Benin Decides for the English service here on West Africa Democracy Radio. Well, starting 6 a.m., we've brought you, again, I should repeat, report excerpts, updates from reporters, and we've also spoken to wise, knowledgeable people on governance and political issues, and we've all had their take. One thing for me is certain, that democracy is the way forward, and that's a sure way to guarantee liberty and progress for every single nation across West Africa and beyond. Sankule.
Yes, indeed. It's a pleasure to host the doctor here. It's really an honor, and of course, special thanks to Austin as well. Like you said, we've come to the final live coverage for the English service. Of course, our colleagues will be here for the final...
In a couple of minutes.
In a couple of minutes, they'll be here for the final edition of the French service. It's been a pleasure, for your company. Thank you so much, Abdullah.
Well, that's all. Just do make sure to join the conversation on our social media platforms to get all the updates, even after the elections. Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Anyway, it was a pleasure to be around.
Okay then. Bye-bye.
You've just listened to the live coverage of the 2026 presidential election in Benin.
WADR. You can listen to us on 94.9 FM in Dakar through our website www